Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, we will invite the next person who will be coming up here for the keynote address. He will be speaking for 30 minutes.
All right, sir. So, round of applause for him. A round of applause. Like he said, he'll be talking for 30 good minutes.
Before he joins us here, I want to, on behalf of the convener, let you all know that today we'll be moving faster than we did yesterday because it's a Friday, and we have to also respect the worship day for the Muslim faithful who will have to depart from about 2 or 3 p.m. So we have to move as fast as possible. So, sir, your time starts now, sir.
My slides, sir. Only the slides, sir. Good morning. Good morning, all. All right, good morning, all. Okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Emeka, for inviting me to speak around Africa Energy Bank. And thanks all. I'll just start by just showing my slide. I have just one slide to tell you about myself, and then what probably makes me feel very comfortable and happy to speak around this, because it's actually related to a project that we're actually working on. We've been thinking of this for the past 5 years to see if you can have a dedicated energy bank to support energy innovation. How do I please have the pointer? Next slide. Do I have the pointer? Okay. I'll prefer to control it myself. Okay. All right, thanks. So just about myself, technical director, just for the past 15 years. I've been in the industry maybe for 25 years now. For just the past 15 years, what I've done, basically technical director, founder of Cypher Crescent, and before then also served as the national vice president for Triple Helix Nigeria, which is actually very, very key to what we are discussing now. How can Triple Helix collaborate with the Africa Energy Bank to accelerate the innovation? For Triple Helix, there is a collaboration between government, industry, and academia to drive innovation. I'm also the vice chairman of the governing board of the Energy Technology Institute, University of Port Harcourt, and previously worked for Shell as a senior reservoir engineer and in Shell Nigeria, and also served as a global subject matter expert for Shell International in integrated production system modeling, where we actually support all the operating system, offices in Shell worldwide for modeling and optimization of petroleum assets. Next slide. Okay, so just give a footprint about who we are. Cypher Crescent, joined Cypher Crescent in 2015 after I left Shell. We've had a footprint, this is just about 20 companies that we've supported in Nigeria and Africa, basically developing technology from first principle, 0 foreign technical partner, research and development all in Nigeria, building mathematical models and getting that. So that gives us a very strong research and innovation footprint across Africa to drive what we do. So we hope that basically, if you have very strong institutions like ourselves, we'll be able to drive a couple of things that we do. Over 10 years operating in a couple of continents around. Next slide, just because of the time. Okay. So we have 5, just to tell about ourselves, 5 different business units in Cypher Crescent. The first unit is focused on energy technology and innovation and services, and the second pillar is around STEM. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as well as innovation. So we proudly say that we have one of the strongest computational mathematics department in the country. We've been, the first code in our mathematics was written 20 years ago. Was for commercial application 2005 when I wrote that as a graduate student at JIP. So we have one of the strong, you want to develop engineering applications. The very strong fundamental computational backbone you need to develop engineering application is what we do at Cypher Crescent. Of course, we do training and talent development, as well as we are currently building and innovating a research ecosystem, which we call Renew, and also working on a gas to liquid system which I'm going to discuss much later, to look at how can GTL support the decade of gas. We discussed, heard about decade of gas and heard about the presidential CNG initiative, but we have actually neglected one part in our energy transition ecosystem, which is the GTL, which is basically what I'm going to discuss a bit about. Next slide. Okay, so I said I am a man of three parts: Cypher Crescent, Triple Helix, and University of Port Harcourt. So this is about Triple Helix. For those who know, there was a conference on Triple Helix 2 weeks ago. Basically, Triple Helix is about how can government, academia, and industry collaborate together to drive innovation. We launched Triple Helix in 2022 in Nigeria after securing approval from the conference in Florence in June 2022. Triple Helix's driven objective is basically Vision 10-10-10. Where can we, in the next 10 years, how can 10 universities have 10% equity in 10 listed companies? It means industrializing the academic system, moving from research to publication to research to innovation is basically what we do. And actually, a non-governmental organization with 4 solid pillars: the pillar of entrepreneurial orientation, the pillar of research and innovation collaboration, the pillar of innovation infrastructure, and the pillar of innovation financing. And all these are really very critical in what we are discussing here about Africa Energy Bank providing infrastructure, providing finance, providing the orientation and the collaboration with industry to drive what we do. And then the third part of who I am is, next slide. Okay, so I also work for University of Port Harcourt, Vice Chairman, Governing Council. My company is currently building this institute, University of Port Harcourt. We expect to get this institute completed, sometime next year, Q2 next year, because we plan to actually get this completed before the current administration put in. So basically collaborating with NCDMB and PTDF to get this done. And this is basically one of the key institute that would drive research and innovation in the country and actually industrialize our knowledge institutions to look at that. So currently offering diploma program, master's program, PhD, and also 2 other aspects that are actually not too common in Nigerian universities. This is basically one of the first that we'll have in terms of a university venture studio, where you actually incubate, instead of graduating students, you graduate startups. And there's also an engineering design studio. We say we have one of the strongest mathematics departments in the country. We're writing code here for the past 25 years around computational mathematics. All the mathematics that I heard some person say mathematics that you study in school, they're not important, but all the mathematics I studied in school are actually applied in what we do, and I can still remember. I tell some person that I can still go to the university today, give me the mathematics exams to write. In 1 hour to prepare, I still have the AI I had last time, because it's what we do every day and internalize it to manage that. We also want to set up inside this institute to have an engineering design studio. All what I'm speaking here is related to what I want to present about how can Africa Energy Bank help to industrialize Nigeria, and that cannot be done without discussing around the university. And so also have a simulation center of excellence in the institute once it's actually ready. Next slide. Okay. So we're looking at Africa Energy Bank. How can Africa Energy Bank support industrialization of the country? But just to reflect on basically how our Western institutions industrialize, the role of global university ventures. I'll just flip through this slide. It's basically courtesy Professor Ajenka. I got this slide from one of his presentations a couple of years ago. Next slide. Okay, so this is basically Caltech, California Institute of Technology. Some of the built over 20, 30 very strong companies who have helped to actually change the whole land ecosystem of innovation in the US, in California. Very small university of about 11,000, 12,000, but the amount of innovation coming out of that university is actually more than what we do in Africa. And if you have a bit of that in a university around Nigeria, funded by an institutions like Africa Energy Bank, you know that you basically change the landscape of industrialization in Nigeria. Next slide. I'll just put in. The same thing is happening across the world. So this is basically Oxford, spin-off in Oxford. We have a long list of this because as part of what we do in Triple Helix, we track university global ventures to see how are they building startups and building companies. Next slide. Same thing happened again. This is Cambridge Enterprise Center. You see engines of innovation, enterprises in universities to drive that, but they are supported by very strong financial institutions to actually get that. And so next slide. So this is basically my best IFP in France, where you have more like an industry within a university driving that. This is, of course, the industrial development portfolio to look at that. I'm sure you know, some of us in oil and gas know about Technique FMC, started from IFP, and a couple of these things. Those guys were actually funded by, so you can see that there's actually a division in the university that's enterprise development. You have founders. The lecturers are actually directors in these companies to drive innovation. So once this is done, but it needs to be supported by a very strong financial institution to be able to drive innovation and industrialize a country. Next slide. Okay, so why are all this possible? It's because of a mindset change, and that will tell us about 3 different quadrants of research, and it's named after 3 famous scientists. I think the first is Niels Bohr, which we call the Bohr quadrant, where you do research for the purpose of knowledge. And that means you are in that Bohr, of course, Niels Bohr actually won a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1922 and established the Institute of Theoretical Physics in Copenhagen, which is now called the Niels Bohr Institute now in Denmark, and so in Copenhagen. So basically, most of his, of course, a lot of publications are attributed to Niels Bohr, but in those days, you won't see any invention, anything, basically, that Niels Bohr's idea was used when he invented this, even before he won the Nobel Prize. Of course, now a lot of things have been applied from what his knowledge. And then another person, again, is basically Thomas Edison. Of course, one of the greatest inventors of our time. Go back to literature, you hardly see publications around written by Thomas Edison. And so he's basically focused on invention. But in modern industrialization era, we actually try to copy the ways of Louis Pasteur. Pasteurization. Of course, we know about vaccination, a couple of things that Louis Pasteur does. He's actually an industrialist and also a strong academic person. And it's basically how we want to discuss as a country to actually revolutionize an institutions where you have a university that exists and exists in the Pasteur's quadrant where this research is being done, publications is being done from those things, and also innovation and startup companies are coming up funded by strong financial institutions is basically where we are trying to look at. And how can that be done? That can only be done if you have a very strong financial system, or like Africa Energy Bank. Next slide. Okay, so what we are discussing here about Africa Energy Bank coming to Nigeria, but you've had it in China already, the Chinese Energy Bank, the case study. Look at it. So the Chinese Energy Bank, their objective then was basically to fund renewable energy in China. So they worked with a couple of universities to actually make this possible. Next slide. Okay, so this is just a case study of the Chinese Energy Bank. Go back to look at oil consumption rates in China for the past 3 to 5 years. You see that it's almost stable. Meanwhile, they are actually industrializing. The secret there is that basically there's actually a very strong intake of renewable energy in China. And that was possible because there was actually a government policy dedicated, where the bank was created or mandated to actually support renewable energy through the China Import-Export Bank, and look at projects around, just look around funded solar, wind projects, of course, working with universities in China, Shanghai University, a couple of top universities were actually the backbone of this industrialization of China, driving that with the Chinese Energy Bank. Next slide. Okay, so we just look at it. What would be the lesson? What's the lesson for Africa for this? They've done it in China, and we have our Africa Energy Bank. How can we learn? How can we learn from that? First of all, is R&D. How much do we spend on R&D? Investment in R&D. Our discussions to look at compare Africa figure and the Chinese figure. Also look at it in terms of the institutions too. How many institutions do we have in the country that is dedicated to research and development, where you can walk into that institution and ensure that you have very strong innovation happening that will support industry? We have a couple of industries. ThankGod is around the country. How many institutions have been created to say we want to support ThankGod? You want to support most of the strong oil and gas companies in the country. Is basically the kind of mindset and that's basically the mindset that we use when we are developing the Energy Tech Institute in University of Port Harcourt. Our objective is that institute should be able to serve the oil and gas company, where instead of course, I worked in a research center in Netherlands in Shell before resigning to come in here. I know that most of the research that is being done there was basically Shell was supporting the operating unit. So basically, we're getting that institution to become an institution that will support R&D in the country. But we can't do that alone because the amount of money we have is very tiny. But imagine that an Africa Energy Bank establish an Energy Technology Institute and fully fund that institute with the software, with the infrastructure, with the manpower inside there to actually change the landscape of what we do in innovation. That's basically what we expect, that if Africa Energy Bank comes in, we'll be able to collaborate with institutions like Triple Helix organization and replicate a very strong institution that will be able to drive innovation, drive industrialization, not importing the energy things, but these things can be done. And how are they done? They are done by fundamental physics and chemistry and mathematics to be able to look at that. So funding of those things will also be possible. So next slide. Okay, so of course, we'll go back again to African natural gas, Nigerian natural gas. I'm a petroleum engineer. We've studied gas in school. Of course, you understand how much gas resource we have. Nigeria is called a gas nation with tiny droplets of oil and so on. So how much are we doing with that gas? We can change Nigeria with gas, and basically that's what the full part of this presentation we've worked on. I've worked on this presentation for this and also working on this from a Triple Helix perspective. How can we leverage gas to industrialize Nigeria end-to-end, leveraging Triple Helix infrastructure, financing, collaboration, and orientation. We should ask ourselves and also reflect on, and for those advising the Africa Energy Bank to look at that. Look, natural gas can be seen as not just a transition for the destination fuel, but actually a venue to actually use to industrialize the country by building the full value chain, not by importing products to come in here. Those products can actually be done and by entrepreneurs in the country. Next slide. Okay, so we look at what are the challenges? Why are we not developing applications, developing equipment and innovation in the gas space? Is basically what to do. But of course, you look at it in terms of procurement. You have an institution like the Africa Energy Bank. What role would they play in the procurement of equipment that we need? For those of us who work in the gas space, you know how much you see a lot of startups around, a lot of innovators around. You start asking, why don't we have engineering startup? I read through the Startup Act, Nigerian Startup Act, and I saw, once you look at that Startup Act, you said that Startup Act was written not for engineering, not for science development, but for fintech. But the tiny amount of money is given to you to driving a startup cannot take off when you want to develop innovation around oil and gas. We need a very strong institution where you want to look at this. If you have less than $10 million, you actually not started to be able to do research and innovation in the gas space to develop something that will transform oil and gas. I'm discussing this from experience of the past 20 years, working in this space, developing applications, actively having been part of an E&P company at an international level, at the highest level, and also leading a company driving this to look at, we need funding and sustainable funding. We don't borrow money 10% per month that is being done around the country to do innovation. You won't get innovation. You only just get a contract and outsource the contract out of the country. But this will not be done. And basically, Africa Energy Bank will help us to actually achieve this and also support research and development, capacity building. We want to do capacity building. We've also been analyzing the capacity building initiative of strong institutions in the country. What are we looking at? We are building capacity to provide support for technologies that have already been developed. We are not building capacity to provide insights that will help us develop technology. And for you to do that, it's basically an institution that has interest in Nigeria, interest in Africa for you to develop long term. Most of the institutions around probably build capacity because they are compelled to do that as part of their CSR. They are compelled to do that. But if you want to look at it and say, let's develop capacity to drive that, it's basically what we expect Africa Energy Bank to look at in terms of research grants, very, very good research grants, and also have advisory boards, industrial advisory boards that will actually render this money and get some things done. It's basically what we want to look at. How do you encourage local manufacturing to drive this? Next slide. Okay. So in line with the theme of this conference, to look at the procurement challenge that we have around, and then how can Africa Energy Bank support us to look at that? Look at the upfront capital requirement for advanced technology. You want to start innovation. How much capital do you need? Do we have that? Do we have a dedicated fund that is supporting R&D in the country? Do we have a dedicated fund that supports innovators in the country? Not the fund that supports us importing the materials, assembling them around here. That's basically business or trading. But we're looking at it in terms of innovation, in terms of entrepreneurship in the natural gas sector is basically what we're actually looking at. So in terms of access to equipment, engineering software, most of this software, you can look at installing one engineering software that you need to do research might be up to $1 million. How many universities around or research institutions around have capacity to actually put up that? So you have an institution like Africa Energy Bank. What we are proposing in the Triple Helix organization is basically to have a regional innovation hub center where resources are pulled in to build one center, pick up, let's say, South-South, pick up University of Port Harcourt, probably Southwest, maybe University of Ibadan or University of Lagos and Southeast. So keep one university, empower that university with all the software that you need to do innovation. We actually neglect the universities in most of these things that we do, as well as, of course, currency fluctuation. You have a bank that can also help to manage that, and as well as looking at terms of regulatory framework, which can be managed if you have a bank that collaborates with government to drive that. And basically, that's the reason why I actually had to show Triple Helix coming around here. We don't discuss about development. We don't discuss about a big bank. It would be a big mistake for a bank like Africa Energy Bank to come in and operate the traditional way, where we actually neglect the universities to look at that. I was supposed to be in Mexico. I had a presentation yesterday. I had someone to do that because I wanted to be around here. They are having the Triple Helix International Conference. My colleagues are there in a university in Mexico. And you look at amount of innovation coming out of that university. Of course, when you move around to study those things, how do we have this in Nigeria and in Africa to have this? Next slide. Okay, so it's basically so just to look at it in terms of a case study, we are building a modular gas to liquid technology in Cypher Crescent. To support a Nigerian decade of gas. You look at the decade of gas, we only have GTL, we have LPG, and so much about CNG, so much about LNG. Where the question is, where is GTL playing? Gas to liquid technology. I know if we talk about GTL, we know about the Escravos GTL. Those are really very big GTL plants. We have a lot of chemical engineering department in the country. We have a lot of gas engineering department in the country. Why are we not developing technology for gas to liquid? So we are actually leveraging fundamental thermodynamics, fundamental mathematics to be able to develop this. We've actually gone this and gotten a patent for this and got all the engineering designs done. done, a simulation done to be able to institutionalize a gas to liquid to add another pathway for gas monetization in addition to what the decade of gas have. And that can only be done when you have a very strong institutions. So the whole value chain of the equipment, the fabrication, the manufacturing of this is basically what we're doing in country. And it's really very challenging to look at that because it's like you are doing an isolated stuff in a country where nobody does it and you do it. So you have to pay the price of all the infrastructure that you want to do. And that's where the African Energy Bank comes in to support in terms of gas processing equipment that you need to manage to look at this. So we are using, for those who study chemical engineering, a fundamental Fischer-Tropsch process to manage this from that perspective of engineering. So to get this down, just to rush because of time. So these are some of the processes that we actually employing for the gas to liquid technology development. Starting from the process unit, which is the autothermal reforming skids, the Fischer-Tropsch reactors, upgrading, and then as well as, of course, for the catalyst part of it, we look at using a nickel-based catalyst with cobalt-based FT synthesis to manage that. So I'm displaying this, of course, the control system, safety system to manage this. So to actually manage this and get this done, the question is that why are other persons not doing this? This is highly expensive to actually get this done. To build a prototype for this, based on our initial very conservative costs that we're putting as a protocol funding is over $100 million to actually build a prototype for this. And a prototype which may work or may not work. And which bank, which institution has up to $100 million to give to you to throw away? Because you might build this prototype and it doesn't work, and build 2, 3 prototypes. But if you have a bank dedicated into research and development, you have people who are very sound-minded like yourself that will be part of that development and see that this is done, and then you do 2, 3 things. If this is done and it's working, it changes the landscape and using the equipment as a service business model to manage that. But most of these things to look at now, do we have that? So next slide. Okay, so I just place this for us to reflect on what it takes to do innovation around the gas space, on amount of money that you need to look at. What I place there, the process units, for you to get an autothermal reforming skid, it actually goes for between 0.5 to $5 million, depending on how much gas you want to process to manage that. So, assuming you want to keep a university in Nigeria to actually carry this, who is going to fund this process? The budget of the university for 10 years will not even actually fund this project. They talk about a particular department to manage this. So if we are serious about developing our university ecosystem, we need to pick up financial institutions and attach to universities to manage that. So we are actually carrying out this research, of course, working with partners across Nigeria, across Africa, to basically put this together to manage this. But if you have an institution, imagine that each of these technology institutes happen across Africa. You'll be able to come up with technology that will actually industrialize it. The amount we're discussing with NCDMB a couple of days ago to analyze the amount of human capacity development that is required once we complete this. You are employing over 10,000 to manage this from end to end if it's produced in country. If it's produced in country, not imported, because each of these things here will be done in country to manage this, from mechanical engineers, process engineers, mathematicians, welders, manufacturers to manage this. Next slide, because of time. Okay, so a key question is that why don't we have entrepreneurs in the gas space? Startups all around the country. Ask the person who is doing startup in the natural gas space, fundamentally developing technology for the oil and gas industry. You find out that as much as possible, I've not heard any who's doing that, and why? You don't have the funding to manage that. you also don't have the expertise. Most of this expertise requires very strong collaboration. We are doing this because of my strong international network. I'm able to pull out international partners who are friends and colleagues I've worked before to be able to support what we are doing in these things. But this can be done by an institution like Africa Energy Bank to actually pull out the network and indicate one of these in every country. Nigeria is very big compared to Africa, so it won't be fair to say you're only having one in Nigeria. Have like three or four in Nigeria, and fully funded to manage this. Of course, the long payback period might be about 7 years to manage. The commercial banks cannot fund most of this, or the interest rate given to you in commercial bank cannot fund this thing. So some persons have interest rates, some universities, entrepreneurs outside the country actually get interest rate as less than 1% per annum to actually drive this. But come to Nigeria, some people are getting over 100% per annum if you are lucky to get to fund this. Those interest rates cannot fund research and development. Next slide. Okay. So just to look at what will, if you want to, what role will Africa Energy Bank play in terms of driving innovation? And it starts from first principle. First principle starts from academia. Let's pick up one university in the country for now, because you want to look at natural gas innovation. Install process simulation software in that aspect, of course. Also engineering design software, control and implementation. This will span across departments where you see collaboration between the science and engineering department to manage this. To set up all the software here, based on the initial analysis we've done, will not cost anything less than $10 million to get the minimum of this one per year to manage this. But that can be done if you actually have a strong bank to support that. And we should see research and development as not a waste. We prefer spending money on physical things, but not on intangibles, to actually transform the Nigerian natural gas ecosystem. We need to be deliberate about investing in intangibles. Intangibles are the things that will transform what we do. The tangible things that we're importing will actually serve us for today. But for long term, you need those intangibles to manage that. Next slide. Okay. Actually, we're actually analyzing, we got this slide based on some of the discussions we're having with NCDMB, Nigerian Content Development Monitoring Board, to look at what are the capacity development needs that you need to actually look at that. These are just some of the expertise you need basically to actually work with us in the gas to liquid thing. And this externally, we actually remove the internal expertise because you need very strong mathematicians, a lot of partial differential equations, very complex these things that we're solving around here to manage this are not part of it because we have that in-house. Of course, how do we move what we have in-house to an institution? And that's what we are doing with University of Port Harcourt. We are removing all the mathematics we've developed for the past 20 years and into an institution where somebody can go to year one in the university and start solving mathematics and ask you whatever course you are studying in school from year one to final year, what is the application of this? You can go to the institute and tell you, this one, we've used it in coupling the dynamic system. You look at heat, we had transport phenomena in terms of heat exchanger. We are actually looking at a very strong advanced heat exchange model we are doing in the Energy Tech Institute from the gas to liquid process, where you have the syngas generation part, which is a highly exothermic part of it, as well as the part which is endothermic. How then do you use thermofluid to couple this together from thermodynamics perspective are the kind of knowledge that we need to transform the country. Next slide. Okay, so some of intervention area that we just listed out here for Africa Energy Bank to consider when actually funding research and innovation. Because of time, I'll just move to the next slide. I've passed my time by. Okay, so we are proposing a model we call a Pentahelix model. Pentahelix model is basically a modification of a Triple Helix model where you are bringing in two helices added to a triple helix. So instead of academia, government, and industry for Triple Helix. We're proposing a Pentahelix model where you have academia, government, industry, entrepreneur, as well as a risk capitalist. So to actually drive this. So if you pick up that, how do we build very strong entrepreneurs, very strong government policy, and the bank will actually drive that to be able to manage manage it. So all what I've been discussing was around this, and they also have strong academic institutions. Next slide, and final slide. Okay, so these are some of the quick wins. We can look at establish a regional gas technology procurement hub where there can be shared resources, as well as create pre-approved sponsorship around things that we want to do, and then launch joint financing for facilities that can be used to manage this. So next slide, that will be final slide. Okay, so like we said, we're actually building this in University of Port Harcourt. We have NCDMB as collaborator. We have PTDF as collaborator. If you have we also, as part of the long-term plan for this, we dedicated some amount of money I'm not able to mention that we're keeping here every year to fund startups. It's a tiny amount of money, but just imagine that you have an Africa Energy Bank being part of this collaborator. It completes the Pentahelix ecosystem to drive that, where as you are coming in to do your research, somebody is dropping $100,000 for you as part of your research, and you look at that with an advisory board that will account for that. That's basically our dream when we are building this. So this building will be commissioned. Some of us will be invited next year. We'll be commissioned in University of Port Harcourt next year, and we want to make it such that as students are enrolling, we are actually giving you some money for your innovation. But that money will not be big enough. Imagine, instead of we giving you that money is given to you by Africa Energy Bank. It actually helps to change a mindset that will bring the best talents across Africa to drive innovation in Nigeria. Next slide, thank you. Okay, so call to action. Of course, it's a good thing to have the Africa Energy Bank. China has done it. It has helped to transform renewable in China. Other countries have done it from a Triple Helix perspective. But if we have this in Africa, that would be a strong thing to drive, of course, with support from government, from industry, academia, and working together, we can build a very strong procurement system that will support sustainable development in Africa. Thank you.